Hey guys, it's Paige, or Duchess Celestia, and today we're going to be talking about the most infuriating and also most frequently asked question that I can think of. Is digital art easier than traditional art, and is it real art? You guys voted for this on Twitter, so don't tell me I'm doing it for clickbait. You chose the topic, it just happens to be a really controversial one. Actually, within the art community, it's not controversial at all, to my knowledge. But outside of the safe loving arms of other artists, the sheer number of people who actually still think that digital art is cheating, is easy, or isn't real art is just deeply upsetting. So today we're going to break down not only the answer to the question of whether or not it's easier, but tackle all of the reasons that people tend to assume that it is. First though, the art. I'm really not super pleased with how this one came out, but because I'm rushing a bunch of new merch designs to release on December 1st, I really only had time to do something super simple for today's video. As such, I fell back on what I usually fall back on when I'm trying to do something simple and fun and fast, which is long floopy hair. The last time I actually sat down and drew hair for the sake of drawing hair was around 2 years ago, I think. And while I'm not super pleased with how this turned out, comparing this one to that one in terms of quality does at least show some improvement, it's nice. And I'm drawing Seraphine, yes, from League of Legends. I'm sorry, her hair's just so nice and pretty, and I couldn't resist using her as my hair doodling subject. I know there's an unbelievable amount of drama and discourse surrounding every aspect of her right now. Development, her kit, similarities to Sona, her design, literally fucking everything. But can we not all agree that she's a very pretty lady with nice hair? Look at her. I also couldn't decide whether I liked the simple version without editing, or a real background, or the pinker one with the background. So, they're both here. Anyway, before my gay little heart starts ranting about the beautiful ladies of League again, let's get into a basic introduction of today's real topic. To start, I'm going to go over a bit of terminology just in case any of you aren't familiar. So when I say traditional art, I'm referring to all art that's created with tangible physical supplies. Canvas, sketchbooks, pens, paints, etc. And when I say digital art, I'm referring to all art that's created on a computer. And to start on an impartial note, I do both traditional and digital art. I would actually be inclined to say that my traditional art is significantly better than my digital art, but that's largely because my traditional stuff is less people and more bugs, plants, animals, flowers, and scenery, which is what I'm objectively best at in that medium. Traditional art is where I started, and I started digital art when I was around 12, I think, on MS Paint, and then eventually Sci. I do both forms of art professionally now, so when I discuss this topic in particular, please know that in terms of experience, I'm genuinely unbiased. That in mind, I'm going to try to be as civil and understanding as possible when it comes to this particular topic and discussion, because while I know that there are some art snobs out there who actually genuinely know what digital art is and still think it's not real art, I feel like a good number of people who wonder if it's real art or if it's easier than traditional art actually just want to know. I think the number of people who are educated in this and still want to be dicks to digital artists pales in comparison to the number of people who just aren't super educated on the topic and want more information. So having said that, I'd rather cater to those people who actually want to learn rather than shit all over everyone who looks down on digital art just because some do. So, what are the biggest arguments people use when claiming that digital art is easier than traditional art? The one that I've personally heard the most is, the computer does it for you. And that could mean a lot of things. So before we get into specifics, let's just take it at face value and assume that they actually think the computer is generating the digital art without any skill needed from the artist. And obviously that is not the case. No program can make art for you. Programs, tablets, computers, they're tools and canvases for digital artists. They're not the artists. And a tool can only reflect the level of skill that the actual artist using it possesses. If you can't draw for shit, no program is going to be able to make what you create look like you can. It just quite simply cannot. It's not automatic. But let's assume that by this argument they mean that, as programs allow for the use of brushes and tools that can create textures, shapes, patterns, and that kind of stuff for you, without you actually having to do so manually, they're giving you a cheat or shortcut that therefore makes digital art easier than traditional art. And honestly, looking at that from the perspective of someone who isn't an artist, it actually makes a lot of sense why people might think that, but it is not the case. To elaborate on that, let's consider Bob Ross as an example. The man, the legend. His whole deal was showing people shortcuts and cheats within painting. That's literally the majority of his shows. He used a palette knife to make the majority of his mountains at 1 mountain per second speed. So much of what he taught was using brushes and tools creatively to achieve quality results in less time than if you did all of those things manually. And by manually, I realize that all art is manual. I mean, taking a small brush and actually individually painting every detail of a mountain, rather than doing it with a palette knife. Anyway, the point here is that using those creative techniques is obviously not cheating. It's a method. And most importantly, it's a method that wouldn't work if the artist didn't have the skill to make it work, and that's the big thing here. All tools within any medium of art require the artist to know what the intended result should look like, which therefore means that they know how to achieve the result without the tools that might make it faster, and they require knowledge of the tools that they're using and skill with which to use them. If you don't know where the shadow is going to fall on a mountain, where the snow would lay, where to highlight, where to put the mountain to begin with, knowing how to make the shape of it with a palette knife is not going to help you. That tool without skill as an artist cannot make the art for you, at least not well, and it's exactly the same with digital art. For example, I used to use a cloud brush to just make my clouds. Like, that was it. I just slapped down the cloud brush with a plain white color and called those clouds because I didn't know better. They were flat, formless, poorly executed, and generally looked like semi-opaque cotton balls thrown around the sky, and that's because all I had was a tool, and no skill with which to use it. Now when I use the cloud brush, I use it to create a general shape which I then clean up and refine, and I use it to shade and highlight the clouds within that shape. This was a bad example because I'm still really shitty at clouds, but the point is that the tool alone will never substitute knowledge, and to make any kind of passable art, you need to know the fundamentals of art, whether you're doing it digitally or traditionally. The next argument that I've heard a lot that ties in closely with this is that the tools that digital artists use can essentially create aspects of art without the artist needing to learn how to create them themselves. And I'm going to continue with the cloud example here because it's easiest, and again, mine need improvement, which is why you can see that I am not drawing clouds in the video where I apparently have decided to talk extensively about clouds, but moving on. So, not only does the whole art tools does not an artist make argument still apply in response to this, but it's also kind of assuming that there's a larger gap between digital and traditional art than there really is. So, say I know how to make clouds perfectly using digital techniques, and someone hits me with a, "I bet you can't paint that in real life." Why are you assuming that my knowledge of what clouds look like and how to replicate them doesn't transfer over to another medium? Yes, I have more experience using digital tools, but I'm ultimately as familiar with what a cloud should look like, and the steps that I need to take to make it look like that, as any traditional painter would be. I still learned all of those skills and basics, I just learned them differently. It's not a matter of whether or not I could paint clouds on a canvas, it's a matter of how long it would take me. Because while I have the art skill to create a cloud, I don't know the tools with which to do so quickly, using shortcuts. A traditional painter like Bob Ross, however, could create the same result that I could, much faster. Because despite having the same knowledge of art, he would have much more experience with the tools needed to shit out a godly-looking cloud using that particular medium. The same goes for a traditional painter using a digital medium. They could make just as good of a cloud as I could, but I could do it faster because I know those tools better. This is a really long-winded and poorly worded explanation for what is essentially just no. Digital artists don't get to skip learning those basics, they just learn them using different tools and techniques. They still know them just as well. To be clear, I'm not talking about people who will literally just copy and paste aspects of their art into it rather than learning how to make it with brushes. Like, if you copy and paste a sky background rather than drawing your clouds, yes, this argument does apply to you, and that is easier than traditional art by far. I did that at several points in my career though, so no judgment. I've just since learned that it's not worth it, and you should learn to do the thing yourself. That's just my opinion though, and that's the stance that I'm taking when approaching this particular aspect of the argument. Ultimately, the majority of the points that I've heard circle around the misconception that art programs do the work for the artists without as much skill required, and in conclusion of my rambly disaster of a response, that is not the case. The one thing I will say in defense of the digital art is easier argument is that digital art is vastly more easily manipulated. You can change the colors you've used at any time, you can use the undo tool and your mistakes didn't happen. You can manipulate pretty much every aspect of your art, because nothing is permanent or impossible to erase. There's no arguing against that. It's true, and that's easier, 100%. But this is not an argument that can then be used to say that digital art isn't as good as traditional art, doesn't take as much skill, or isn't real art. To put it simply, these factors make digital art easier to polish, but not easier to create. Yes, you can change the colors much more easily, but you still need to know color theory and what's actually going to look good in order to change them. Yes, you can undo your mistakes, but you still need to have the skill enough in art to know that you've made a mistake. Yes, you can manipulate a lot of aspects of your work, but you need the skill and expertise to know what you should manipulate and how you should manipulate them. Digital mediums offer you the ability to polish your work much more easily than traditional art, and that's just a fact. But that's the extent of what they can do for you, without the same amount of art skill that traditional art takes. I don't even want to know the number of times I've said digital and traditional in this video, or how many times I repeated myself, or went on a tangent, or used 50 sentences to say what a better constructed single sentence could probably say. I'm tired and I'm very passionate, okay? I draw stuff, I don't write stuff, don't at me. Anyway, in conclusion, no. Fundamentally, digital art is not easier than traditional art. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm sorry, words are not my strong suit. If you agree, disagree, have other thoughts or opinions that I didn't cover, please don't hesitate to comment them below because I'd really like to hear other takes on this as well. Also, I'm sorry, but as I'm rushing a whole new line of merch in time for December 1st, there will not be a video next week. I'll pick up where I left off with a once-a-week upload schedule every Friday or Saturday as of December, but from today on I'm going to be drowning in merch work and coffee and shitty Netflix horror movies until I'm done, so please bear with me, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe so that my dying ego and need for validation can get the boosts they need.